We were sitting at the long oak dining table in Arlington, Virginia, the one I built with my own hands the first year we moved in. The varnish had dulled. A few knife marks ran across the surface from the time Jace tried to slice open a box without a cutting board. No one ever bothered to sand them out. They're probably still there. It wasn't dinner. There was no food, no wine, not even the pretense of a meal. Just water glasses and the steady ticking of the wall clock. It was a meeting. That's how Brooks framed it. She said it was important. Said it was time we discussed things openly. She meant it was time for me to be cornered, and that everyone had already rehearsed their lines. She sat at the head of the table, back straight, hands folded like a mediator, like someone above the conflict, not in the thick of it. She didn't look at me when she started speaking. She looked past me. "He's basically dead weight," she said, calmly, loudly, each word landing like a courtroom verdict. "He doesn't decide anything." That was her opening. No warmth, no hesitation, like I wasn't sitting 3 feet away, like she was reading a medical chart, not talking about the man who'd paid every bill in that house for the last 7 years. I didn't argue, not because I didn't have words. God knows I did, but because I'd learned the hard way that in this house, my voice was ammunition for someone else's G*N. The more I said, the more she could twist it. If I stayed silent, they had less to work with. So I sat still, expressionless, let her dig the hole without my help. She needed me to react. She was waiting for it. A shout, a slammed fist, a look of betrayal, something ugly, something she could point to later and say, "See, that's who he is." But I gave her nothing. I didn't even blink. Across the table, Kayla and Jace leaned back in their chairs like they'd been waiting for this show to begin. Kayla wore a sweatshirt I bought her last Christmas, $130 she never thanked me for. Jace's phone buzzed in his lap, but he didn't pick it up. He just watched me, eyes gleaming with that cheap, victorious glint teenagers get when they know someone's losing. "You're a burden," Kayla said, smiling. "Move out." Came out as a joke, light, flippant. But the words were razors. I heard no laughter, just contempt in a higher pitch. Jace snorted. "You don't even do anything. You just exist." No one asked who paid the $6,700 monthly rent. No one mentioned the electric bill or the car insurance or the internet they used to stream their shows every night. I paid for the phone Jace scrolled on, the AirPods in Kayla's ears, the fridge they raided at midnight. Every breath of comfort they took had my name written under it in small, invisible print. But to them, I was just background noise. I looked at Brooks. She said nothing, didn't flinch, didn't correct them, just stared down into her glass of water like it held an answer she couldn't say out loud. Her silence said more than her words ever had. She agreed with them, maybe not in her heart, maybe not completely. But in that moment, with her husband on trial and her children swinging the gavel, she chose a side. And it wasn't mine. I sat in that silence, feeling something shift. Not rage that had burned out years ago. What I felt was colder than that. Heavier. Like a foundation finally cracking under the weight it was never built to carry. I had seen it coming. The last few months it had been building. Late dinners with empty chairs, Brooks taking the kid's side even before she heard the full story. The way Kayla would roll her eyes when I spoke. The way Jace didn't look up from his screen even when I said goodnight. It all piled up. Quiet. Constant. Like rain that seeps into wood until it rots from the inside. But I had hoped. That was my mistake. I thought effort mattered. I thought time would win them over. I thought 7 years of presence, of picking up dropped balls, of stepping in where their father disappeared, would buy me a place at the table. I thought love, when given long enough, became impossible to ignore. I thought wrong. "We've talked about this," Brooks said finally, her voice coated in the false calm of someone trying to sound reasonable. "This isn't working anymore. You're not happy. The kids aren't happy. It's not healthy. Not healthy." That's the phrase people use when they want to make betrayal sound like self-care. The kids smirked. Jace stretched his legs out under the table like he'd won something. Kayla rested her chin in her palm and stared at me like I was a math problem she was tired of solving. They'd already decided. This wasn't a discussion. It was a presentation. And the title slide was, "We're done pretending you matter." I had questions I didn't ask. Who was going to cover next month's rent? Did Jace think his sarcasm could pay for car insurance? Was Kayla going to smile her way through a job interview? They didn't know. They didn't care. They had the illusion of power, the backing of their mother, and the certainty of kids who'd never had to pay for the roof over their heads. But here's what they didn't understand. What Brooks, in all her planning, had never accounted for: you don't get to call someone a burden and still demand they carry the weight. Because that's what this was. They didn't want me. They just wanted the money to stay. They wanted the stability without the man behind it. The perks without the presence. They wanted to live in a house I paid for and pretend it was theirs. Like I was some ugly scaffolding they couldn't wait to tear down once the structure was strong enough to stand without me. But they were wrong. They'd always been wrong. Because the money didn't come from nowhere. The roof didn't hold itself up. And I wasn't scaffolding. I was the damn foundation. They just didn't see it or refused to. 7 years I lived with those kids. 7 years of rides to school, last-minute grocery runs, helping Kayla finish essays at 11 p.m. because she forgot they were due. 7 years of sitting through Jace's parent-teacher nights while his actual father couldn't be bothered to show. 7 years of being called Steve instead of Dad, even after they took the gifts, the trips, the allowances, the stability. And now this. A courtroom. A public execution dressed up as a family meeting. "You should go," Brooke said, not unkindly. "It's just not working anymore." I wanted to ask her, when did it stop working for you? Was it last Christmas, when I spent $1,400 on presents that you said were too much? Was it when I asked Jace to mow the lawn and he said, "You're not my real dad? I don't have to listen to you"? Was it when Kayla stopped saying thank you? When you stopped defending me? Or was it just now? When it became easier to call me dead weight than admit you'd been leaning on me this whole time? But I didn't ask. Because I already knew the answer. This wasn't sudden. It was just the first time they'd said it out loud. I didn't pack like a man in a hurry. I folded every shirt. Lined up my boots, laces tied. Placed the shaving kit she bought me on Father's Day, the first one, back when she still believed in the idea, into a bag that had traveled more miles than our marriage ever did. I took nothing that wasn't mine. Left the winter coats. Left the cast iron pan I paid for. Left the wine opener, even though I was the only one who drank red. The last thing I touched was the bathroom sink. I wiped it down with a paper towel until it gleamed. That was important. I didn't want there to be a story later about me losing it. About how I stormed out and left the place a mess. No. I wanted them to open the door and see nothing they could twist. Just an empty room. Clean. Quiet. Finished. I didn't slam the door. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't write a note. I left like I'd never been there. No footprints. No blame. Just absence. But something hard settled in my chest as I walked to the elevator. Not grief. Not regret. Something colder. Something that hummed beneath my ribs like steel pulled taut. I had been called a burden. A weight. An extra. And the thing about burdens is this. Once they're removed, the people who called them that are left to carry their own lives. And I was done carrying. I sat in my truck across the street. Watched the windows glow as night set in. Imagined them inside, maybe laughing, maybe shrugging it off, maybe thinking I was bluffing, that I'd come crawling back like always, with groceries and apologies. But this time was different. I opened my phone, pulled up the rent account, the one that had been draining $6,700 from me like clockwork every month. A bleeding I had taught myself not to feel. I hit cancel on the autopay. Then I removed myself from the lease entirely. Logged into the tenant portal. Changed my role from primary to former. No warning. No calls. Just the deletion of a man they claimed was dead weight. I moved methodically utilities, insurance, maintenance services I had set up to keep their lives running without friction. One by one, I pulled the pins out. Quiet. Clean. Absolute. No sabotage. No revenge. Just absence of effort. When the last account was closed, I sat back and stared at the dashboard of my life. All those bills I had paid without a thank you. All those services that kept their comfort humming in the background. Now silent. It felt like turning off a machine that had been overheating for years. They would notice soon. But not right away. Because that's the thing about support. When you do it right, no one sees it. Until it's gone. I spent that night at a Motel 5 exits down the highway. Nothing special. A beige room with buzzing lights and sheets that smelled like bleach. But it was mine. Paid for with my own hand. Slept in by no one else. There was no music playing, no TV, just the heavy hush of a man finally alone. I lay on the bed with my hands folded across my chest like I was preparing for burial. But I wasn't dead. I was waking up. For 7 years, I told myself this was temporary. That the cold shoulder from Kayla was just a phase. That Jace's sarcasm was just teenage armor. That Brooks's silence was just exhaustion. I made excuses for them the way abused men do, quietly, constantly. I thought patience was love. That if I stayed long enough, gave enough, forgave enough, they'd see me. But they didn't want to see me. They wanted what I brought, not who I was. That realization didn't hit like lightning. It settled slow, like dust in a room no one's visited for a while. I lay there in that motel bed and let it cover me. Let it sink into my skin. Let it rewire the stories I'd told myself for years. Stories like, they just need time. She'll speak up next time. I'm not their real dad, but I'm earning my place. Lies. All of them. I had paid for a life where I wasn't wanted. Funded the contempt in their eyes. Kept the lights on so they could mock me under them. I don't blame them anymore. Children learn what they're allowed to learn. And Brooks? She taught them I was optional. She taught them disrespect didn't cost anything. That they could ignore me and still be fed, still be clothed, still be driven to soccer practice in a car I paid insurance on. That night, as I stared at the peeling ceiling of the motel room, I made a decision. I would not fund my own erasure. In the morning, I drove to the storage unit I'd been paying for quietly for months. A backup plan I didn't know I was building at the time. I moved my things in like a man rearranging the last pages of a story before it ends. Suitcase, tools, winter coats, the book Brooks bought me when we were still in that golden phase where we meant something. I held it for a long time. Then I set it on a shelf and locked the unit. On the way out, I got a text. Not from Brooks. From the landlord, Mr. Dalton. A dry man with a comb-over and a clipboard always tucked under his arm. Hey, just confirming. The autopay didn't go through for next month's rent. Can you clarify who's handling the payment now? Also need the new primary contact. The lease lists you, but you've been removed? That was the moment it began, not my revenge. Not my punishment. Just their reality catching up. I stared at the message and felt nothing. No thrill. No regret. Just clarity. They had always assumed the money would keep flowing, even if I didn't. They thought I could be kicked out of their lives but still keep their comfort running in the background. Like a ghost with a checkbook. But ghosts don't pay rent. And I was done haunting that house. I typed out a reply. I'm no longer a resident at that address. I've removed myself from the lease. Please contact Brooks for anything moving forward. Then I turned the phone off. And with it, I turned off the man I had been for 7 years. That man, the provider, the quiet fixer, the wallet in the shape of a human being, had served his time. He'd bent and bled and begged for a place at a table that was never set for him. Now he was gone, and in his place stood someone else. Not angry, not broken, just free. The next evening, the phone came back to life on its own terms. I didn't turn it on out of curiosity. I did it because silence had done its work, and I was ready to hear the noise again. Messages stacked up like overdue notices. Missed calls. Voicemails. Panic has a sound to it, even when it's compressed into text bubbles. The first message that mattered wasn't from Brooks. It was from the landlord. Mr. Dalton didn't waste words. He never did. Keys and outstanding balance. Who's responsible now? That was it. No greeting. No apology. Just the blunt edge of reality. The kind that doesn't care about feelings or family meetings or who said what around a dining table. Contracts don't listen. They only collect. I stared at the screen and felt the smallest, quietest shift inside me. Not satisfaction. Not revenge. Recognition. This was the moment they'd never planned for. In their version of events, I was supposed to vanish. Disappear quietly. A man-shaped inconvenience removed from the room so they could breathe easier. But the money was supposed to stay. Flowing. Automatic. Invisible. Like gravity. They had confused presence with obligation. I didn't answer Dalton right away. I didn't need to. The contract already had its answer, and it didn't include my name anymore. I set the phone down and went about my evening like a man whose hands were finally empty. An hour later, Brooks called. I watched it ring until it stopped. Then again. Then again. On the fourth call, she left a voicemail. Her voice was different now. Tighter. Faster. The calm authority she'd used at the table was gone. Replaced by something brittle. "Why is the rent payment canceled?" she asked, like it was a technical glitch. "The landlord is asking questions. You need to fix this." Fix this. Like I'd broken something that belonged to her. Then came the texts. One after another. Each one escalating. "You didn't tell us you were doing this. This is irresponsible. You set us up." There it was. The rewrite. In her story, I wasn't a man responding to what was said to him. I was a saboteur. A coward. A villain who pulled a stunt and ran. Accountability, in her mind, only flowed in one direction. Toward me. I didn't respond. Kayla texted next. Formal. Almost polite. Like she was emailing customer service. "We need to talk about the lease situation. You can't just leave us with this." Jace followed. Shorter. Sharper. "Seriously? What the hell is wrong with you?" I read them all. Slowly. Carefully. Like evidence. Not one message asked if I was okay. Not one acknowledged what had been said to me. Not one apologized. They didn't see a man who had been cut loose. They saw a utility that had stopped working. For the first time, they were looking at me not as family, but as an asset that had failed them. And I saw them clearly in return. Brooks called again. This time I answered. She didn't say hello. "How could you do this to us?" she demanded. "Do you have any idea what position you've put us in?" The word came easily now. It hadn't when the kids laughed at me. It hadn't when she called me dead weight. But now, with the rent hanging in the air like a loaded P*N. Suddenly I was part of the equation again. I let her talk. Accusations poured out. That I was reckless. That I'd always been unreliable. That this proved everything she'd ever suspected about me. She spoke fast. Like if she didn't slow down, she wouldn't have to hear herself. When she finally paused for breath, I spoke. "You told me to move out." Silence. "You didn't defend me," I continued. "You didn't stop them. You agreed. So I left." "That's not the same thing," she snapped. "You know that's not what we meant." But it was exactly what they meant. They just hadn't meant the consequences. Kayla got on the line then. I could hear the tension in her voice, the forced maturity. "We're trying to figure things out," she said. "But this isn't fair. You can't just abandon responsibilities." That word again. Responsibilities. Funny how it only applied when it benefited them. I thought about all the years I'd swallowed my pride. All the times I paid without being asked, fixed without being thanked, stayed quiet to keep the peace. I thought about the smile on her face when she told me to move out. And I understood something then. They didn't feel guilty. They felt inconvenienced. Jace shouted something in the background. I couldn't make it out, but I recognized the tone. The same one he used when the Wi-Fi dropped or the car wouldn't start. Annoyance, not remorse. Brooks came back on the line. "This is going to affect the kids," she said, like it was a threat. "You're hurting them." I almost laughed. "They hurt me first," I said quietly. She scoffed. "You're being dramatic." There it was. The final erasure. Years of effort reduced to a personality flaw. I ended the call. Minutes later, Dalton texted again. "Need confirmation by tomorrow. Otherwise late fees apply." I replied with one sentence. "I am no longer responsible. Please contact Brooks." That was the moment the ground gave way beneath them. I could feel it even from miles away. The laughter from the meeting was gone now. The certainty, the smugness. In its place was math, deadlines, numbers that didn't care about family dynamics. They had always believed I was optional. The contract disagreed. That night, more messages came in. The tone shifted. Less anger, more pleading. They spoke to me like someone who might still fix things if handled carefully. But I was done negotiating my worth. For years, I had been furniture in their lives, useful, silent, replaceable. Invisible until I stood up and walked out. Only then did they notice the empty space where support used to be. They had mistaken my patience for weakness, my generosity for obligation, my silence for consent. Now they were left with keys, debt, and the sudden understanding that money doesn't love you back. And for the first time since I'd entered that family, I wasn't explaining myself. I was watching, and I wasn't moving. They didn't call the next morning. That told me everything. I had become too real to ignore, and too inconvenient to contact. Their silence wasn't confusion. It was strategy. They were waiting me out, hoping the dust would settle, hoping I'd panic, hoping that guilt would do what shame never could. But they misunderstood the kind of silence I'd chosen. I hadn't walked away in anger. I had walked away in clarity. That week the calls slowed. Messages turned sparse. A strange new quiet settled over everything. I imagined them arguing over what to do, whether to beg, whether to threaten, whether to involve someone else. I imagined Jace throwing a tantrum when the Wi-Fi provider asked for a card he didn't have. I imagined Kayla asking Brooks, again and again, "But why did he just leave?" Because people like them don't understand when support stops. They only understand when punishment starts. But I wasn't punishing anyone. I was just done playing the fool. Then, 5 days after I left, Brooks sent the message I had been waiting for. "We need to talk. The landlord says we're in default. I can't cover this month on my own." That was the shift. The moment the curtain fell. The moment the myth died. The myth that I was disposable. That the life they lived could survive without the man they refused to recognize. She didn't apologize. She didn't say she was wrong. She just wanted me back. Not in the living room, not in the bedroom, not in the family, just back behind the payments. I didn't reply. That same day, a separate text arrived. From Kayla. Short. Measured. "We're sorry. It got out of hand. Please just help Mom out. Help Mom out. Not we miss you. Not we were wrong. Not you didn't deserve that. Just one more ask. One more handout. One more way to spin this until it looked like I was abandoning them instead of simply walking out of a role they had K*led. By evening, the final message came. This one was from Jace. "You're pathetic. You could have just talked to us like an adult. Real men don't run." I read it twice, not because it hurt, but because it confirmed everything I needed to know. Even now, even when the walls were closing in, he thought he could shame me into returning. He thought that by calling my masculinity into question, I'd reach for the hammer and build them another lifeline. He thought I was still susceptible to the same old guilt they'd always relied on. But real men don't run? No, Jace. Real men don't stay where they're humiliated. Real men don't bankroll contempt. Real men don't keep building a home for people who spit on the foundation. I didn't reply. Not to him. Not to any of them. Because explanations are invitations, and I wasn't accepting theirs anymore. Instead, I did something they never expected. Nothing. I didn't come back. I didn't apologize. I didn't send money. I didn't explain my absence to mutual friends. I didn't ask to be understood. I just vanished. Not into the night, not into some dramatic exile, but into a peace they never gave me. Because absence isn't always abandonment. Sometimes it's protection. Protection from being drained, from being used, from being told you don't matter, and still being asked to foot the bill. That month, the lease went unpaid. Mr. Dalton left me a voicemail out of professional obligation, but he already knew what I told him was true. I was no longer on the hook. He ended the message with a dry sigh and a timestamp. 10 days later, the eviction notice went up. They had 30 days to vacate. I didn't go back to see it. I didn't drive by to watch them pack. I didn't need to, because the truth is, they had been packing my exit for years. With every smirk, every eye roll, every time Brooks corrected me in front of them instead of correcting them. Every time she said, "They're just kids," instead of, "That was wrong." Every time she turned a blind eye to the way I was erased from my own household. They had built my goodbye long before I ever gave it to them. And now they were living in it. Friends asked questions, eventually. People who'd seen the social media smiles, the holiday photos, the illusion of a stable life. "Where'd you go? What happened? Is everyone okay?" I told them the truth. Nothing happened. I was told to leave. So I did. And I didn't take the debt with me. Some looked uncomfortable. Some nodded like they understood. But a few, the ones who had been stepfathers themselves, just looked at me for a long moment, then said, "I get it," because they knew. They knew what it's like to give everything to a family and be treated like a substitute teacher. Welcome only until the real thing shows up or the kids get bored of pretending you matter. They knew what it's like to pay the mortgage and still be asked to knock before entering a teenager's room. They knew what it's like to be called not real when every bill has your name on it. Weeks passed. The text slowed, then stopped. I kept living. Got a one-bedroom apartment outside town. Not much, but mine. Paid the rent with a check I didn't resent writing. Cooked for myself. Bought a new pair of boots. Sat in silence that didn't come with strings attached. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells in my own home. I wasn't measuring my tone, my presence, my usefulness. I just was, and I realized something. Love without respect is theater. Devotion without gratitude is slavery. And I had been cast as both, expected to carry the weight of fatherhood while being denied its name, expected to sacrifice without complaint, to provide without pride, to love without limits and be thanked with rolled eyes and closed doors. So I drew a new line, not with threats, not with screaming, but with the one act they never expected, withdrawal. And when I stepped back, when I stopped holding everything up, the collapse came fast. Because they never built anything of their own. They just lived on mine. I saw Brooks once more, months later, at a grocery store. She looked thinner, not sick, just worn. Her face froze when she saw me. Then she gave a smile too small to mean anything. "I didn't think you still lived around here," she said. "I do," I answered. An awkward pause. "Kayla's working now," she said, like it was a trophy. I nodded. "That's good." "She's still mad at you," she added, watching my reaction. "I'm sure she is," I said. Another pause. "I didn't think it would end like this," Brooke said quietly. "It ended the night you said I didn't decide anything," I replied. She flinched. Just a flicker. Then looked away. No apology. Just regret that things didn't stay convenient. She walked off. No goodbyes. I stood there a minute longer, watching her vanish down the frozen aisle. And I felt nothing. Not victory. Not sorrow. Just peace. Because some goodbyes don't come with closure. Some come with bills unpaid and lessons unlearned. And the people who forced you to leave will always rewrite the story so they never look like the villains. But I know the truth. And so do they. So now I ask you, whoever you are, wherever you're sitting, was I wrong? Was I wrong to draw the line when no one else would? To stop giving when giving had become a currency they no longer respected? To choose silence over sacrifice? Would you have stayed? Would you have endured it? Or would you have finally, quietly, done what I did, and walked away from a house that never called you home?